It is said that you become accustomed to being invisible after 30 years of marriage. That was just something resentful people say, I thought. As it happens, it was simply, it's true. Hello, my name is Margaret. Last week was my 60th birthday. No one took notice. Well, with the exception of my 8-year-old grandson Mason, who only recalled because I informed him we were both starting something new this year on the first day of 3rd grade. Adorable, huh? I cooked all day. The type of food that shouts that someone still cares is roast chicken, mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, and a salad with the dressing that everyone liked. Mason was full of stories when he got home from school. Brian, my son, brought a cake. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, grinned as if she had just walked out of a Pinterest advertisement. Harold, my husband, he entered the room, glanced at the table, and uttered, "You prepared everything and failed to remember to get some wine? Nothing like happy birthday, or you look gorgeous." They didn't even look at how many hours I worked preparing the identical dish they all enjoy. Brian, ever the mediator, jumped right in. "Let's not begin, Dad." He placed the cake box on the table as if it were a peace offering, saying, "Let's start with cake and candles." With a glimmer of hope still alive, I opened it. "Congratulations, Mason," the cake read. That's all. Not a single balloon. Not a candle. There was no happy 60th, Mom. No indication that this was a celebration for someone else. I waited. There might have been another cake. There might be a candle hidden somewhere. Perhaps Brian might add, "A surprise is on the way." However, no. That was it. I was a ghost, standing there with the knife in my hand, slicing into my own sadness, while the whole house was alive with the enthusiasm of back to school. Aside from Mason's big day, do you remember what else today is? I questioned Brian softly. Confused, he blinked. Mom, what do you mean? Harold made sure the silence didn't even linger. She constantly manages to complicate things. Simply grab a friggin' lighter. I entered the kitchen. I located the lighter. Candles were lit. I grinned for the pictures, acted as though it didn't hurt. Then Mason dropped his fork in the middle of dinner. "Grandma, I let my fork fall. Get me another one, please." And I didn't jump up for the first time in my life. I said, "You can do that yourself, sweetheart," after giving him a quick glance. He scowled. His mother's chair was kicked. "Margaret, where do you keep the extra silverware?" Melissa asked me with that charming smile. "I will get one." Harold gave me a look like I had just committed a felony before I could respond. "Go get a fork for him." Brian attempted to dismiss it. "Mom is going to handle it." I didn't visit the kitchen, though. I proceeded to my bedroom. I opened my closet, took a suitcase out, and began packing. Bank records, files related to insurance, clothes that I genuinely enjoy. Harold claimed that gifts were a waste of money, so I got myself a pearl necklace 2 years ago. Everything went into the bag. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I simply relocated. I have been carrying this family for decades, you see. To be the good wife, the perfect mother, or the dependable grandmother, I sacrificed everything: my voice, my work, and my goals. I prepared food. I did some cleaning. Harold never gave me any money, so I spent years running a food stand just to have some of my own. His salary? It vanished into beer nights and card games. I stopped asking after he informed me I had spent too much. Silently, I saved. While he remained in front of the TV and told our son that I was too emotional, I sold handmade dumplings in temperatures as high as 40 degrees. For what purpose? So that when I'm 60, I'll be the one getting forks while my husband drinks whiskey and my son acts as though he doesn't realize I'm getting older? Mason had a new fork when I returned to the dining room. Melissa must have gotten it on her own. When I stepped in, she didn't look up, simply continued eating. Harold said something that made Brian laugh. Brian had gone out and purchased a bottle of cheap whiskey as a treat for Dad, and now Harold was holding a glass of it. Alcohol is something I detest, because Harold becomes into a different person when he drinks. Out loud, hostile, inconsiderate. He has destroyed windows, smashed furniture, and vanished for days without a word. I am left to clean up the glass, memories, and fragments of myself after every outburst. Brian is aware of this. He has witnessed it. When Harold was angry as a kid, he would cower behind me. However, Brian eventually came to the conclusion that appeasing the storm was simpler than resisting it. He might have forgotten. Perhaps he simply doesn't want to recall. In any case, I became aware of something in that room. The only person who has ever supported me is me. So I raised my head. I declared, I want a divorce. The room became silent. Harold's face flushed so quickly that I thought he may blow up. You've gone completely insane, he yelled. You want a divorce now that you're almost 70? Brian got up as well. What the devil are you doing, Mom? Can't we ruin dinner? Melissa tightened her grip on Mason. Her face remained unchanged. She simply watched, as if she were anticipating the next soap opera scenario. I gave a serene, false grin. I said, Tonight, I'll be staying at a hotel. You're joining me tomorrow to sign the documents. Harold chuckled, like if I were a child having a fit. You're not receiving any money at all. You'll be sorry you did this. You're going to tear this family apart. Brian added, What are people going to say? Oh, it was there. What are people going to say? The background music of my existence. What will others think if you divorce your spouse? If your son doesn't have a mother at home, what would people think? If you have the courage to choose yourself, what will others think? However, they never inquire. If you don't, what will happen to you? Do you even know when my birthday is? I questioned, glancing at my son, the man I safeguarded, the boy I reared. He parted his lips. I closed it. Nothing. Naturally, he didn't. Since he married? No, not once. I gave a nod. I had that thought. I then left. Behind me, a suitcase is rolling. I've finally decided to move in the direction of the life I should have had all along. I didn't stay at an upscale hotel. Unlike a dramatic heroine from a Lifetime movie, I didn't drive out into the night. I recently reserved a stay at a low-cost motel that is about 5 minutes from my home. I know it sounds absurd, but listen to me. You learn to anticipate escalation after more than 30 years of marriage to a man like Harold. Additionally, I needed to be close enough to safeguard what was still mine, while still being able to breathe again. When I checked in with a luggage, no reservation, and looks that said, "Don't ask questions," the woman at the front desk didn't flinch. She gave a key to me, 214th room. It had the smell of cheap aftershave and bleach. Didn't matter. For the night, it was all mine. With my shoes still on, I sat on the edge of the bed and gazed at the old curtains, wondering what in the world I had just done. Not because I had self-doubt. I didn't. However, nobody initially tells you how calm freedom is. No cheers, no finish line. Just a weary body in a hotel room, with a heart that isn't sure whether to beat more quickly or break. I sent Brian an SMS. Just one sentence. I'm secure. Don't come try to find me. Harold wasn't texted by me. When I was still watching things for myself, I got pad thai and a Diet Coke for takeout and sat quietly while watching reruns of a game show I used to adore. And I came to the following realization, sometime in between the first and second spring rolls. It had been more than 15 years since I had eaten by myself without hurrying. I gave that some thought. Just an observation, not in a negative sense. Similar to discovering that your favorite sweater has been hiding in the back of your closet all along. I contacted a lawyer the following morning, a female, a woman in my book club who, bless her, had divorced her husband after he found Jesus in a CrossFit instructor, enthusiastically suggested this person. I gave the lawyer the rundown. 31 years of marriage, a single adult son, a home, a spouse who never physically assaulted me but always knew how to punish me with quiet. A man who drank too little to leave evidence but enough to become harsh. She paid attention, didn't interfere. Margaret, you've got more strength than most people I've met this year, she commented once I was done. And I nearly burst into tears. It was the first time in years that someone had viewed me as more than just a wife or a grandmother. Not because of the compliment. She guided me through each step. Separation, split of assets, terms that provide protection. The process. She also asked me an unexpected question. Are all of the financial records at your disposal? It was then that I recalled the drawer. Harold's home office is the third one down. He locked it badly every time. I have previously seen the code. 725, the birthday of his poker friend. Our bank statements, tax reports, and perhaps even the will we never discussed were in that drawer. And I intended to obtain them, not because I was seeking retribution. However, I would be damned if I left 31 years of erasing without anything on the other side. Around noon, I took a car back to the house. There was silence. Harold wasn't at home. Brian's vehicle has vanished. Melissa was most likely practicing yoga, soul cycling, or whatever other routine she follows to keep her calm for Instagram. The key was still functional. Like a stranger in a museum display, I entered my own living room and stood there. Everything seemed simultaneously too real and too familiar. Framed pictures from vacations when I cooked everything. Harold detested a throw pillow, but he never bothered to replace it. On the refrigerator, next to Harold's country club wine schedule, is Mason's artwork. I went along the corridor, opened the door to the office. On the first attempt, the drawer clicked open. There were folders, receipts, and a few letters that were sent to Harold's P.O. box, which I was unaware he owned. I took it all, quite nicely, silently. I even let him wonder by leaving the drawer slightly open. I stopped by the kitchen on the way out. Something on the counter drew my attention. Harold's handwritten grocery list. Bread, whiskey, pasta, napkins, dial Diane. I went cold. Diane. Diane was not a companion. She wasn't even from the area. Her name was from a long time ago, one of his former co-workers. When she spent 2 nights on our couch in 2012, he vowed that they were just old co-workers, that she was going through a rough patch, and that she had nowhere else to go. He stopped touching me as if I were genuine that year. With my stomach turned over, I stood there with my list in hand. It had been years since I had given Diane any thought. Now, however, she had returned, not yet not at my house, but in his head, on his list. A portion of whatever followed. The message was left on the counter by me, not to be courteous, to inform him that I saw it, as if he would soon discover that I had seen everything else. I arranged the files back at the motel, took pictures of each significant page, sent copies to my attorney. After pouring myself a glass of inexpensive red wine, I sat in the window and watched the highway traffic pass by like if it were a movie. I wasn't angry yet, but I had changed in some way. They forgot my birthday, but that didn't mean I was going anywhere. I was now remembering who I was, therefore I was heading out. And no amount of shame, inaction, or sarcastic remarks like "you're too sensitive" would erase that memory. Harold called throughout the following morning. Blocked phone number. I allowed it to ring. Then he sent an SMS, "Go home. Let's have a conversation. Don't apologize. No recognition. Only an order." For example, I arrived late to a meeting that I had not scheduled. I gazed at the text. After then, it was erased. Because we wouldn't be in a kitchen the next time we spoke. The location would be a lawyer's office. I would also be bringing receipts with me. With my back straight and my handbag stuffed with papers, I entered our lawyer's office 3 days after Harold texted. "Let's talk." Yes, I was anxious. Furthermore, I was finished. The peacekeeper role is over. Finished acting as though we could have a civil conversation when he hadn't been polite in years. Harold had already received the divorce notification from my attorney, Stephanie, the one who referred to me as powerful. As I had anticipated, he was tardy, evasive, and used just enough passive-aggressive disdain to irritate even the most understanding legal team. His official role? Everything here is misunderstood. My wife is experiencing an incident as she goes through menopause. Take a moment to process that. His first move after 31 years of marriage was to label me unstable, in the hopes that I would be too embarrassed to follow through. Sadly for him, I had long since moved past my embarrassment. After reading the letter, Stephanie grinned. Deflection of textbooks. It isn't even unique. Nevertheless, we filed. On the same day, I deleted my name from the gas bill on the boat Harold hadn't used in 3 years, canceled our joint checking account, and frozen the credit card he had maxed out twice in the previous 6 months. Petty? Perhaps? Astute? Of course. I also updated my emergency contact information by calling Mason's school because I suspected Melissa wouldn't be keeping things amicable. Brian arrived at the motel that weekend. He didn't make the first call. As if it were his childhood bedroom, he simply knocked on my door. When I opened it, I saw him standing there looking confused, and holding a six-pack of beer, which I detest, he said. Mom, as if I were the one who had lost it. What are you doing? I took a while to respond, simply moved aside to make room for him. He surveyed the room as if it were offensive. You have been residing here? I remarked. It's quiet, and my birthday is remembered by everyone here. That momentarily silenced him. After placing the beer on the table, he took a seat. He said, Dad is freaking out. I waited. He claims that you are attempting to ruin him, that you will inherit everything, including the home and retirement. I blinked. It's interesting because I constructed half of that, and he didn't mind when I cleaned the restrooms at 2 in the morning. In order for Mason to get some rest, Brian combed his hair with his hand. Like me, he was always the peacekeeper, and I could see him working to resolve this as he always had. Why now? He inquired. After all these years? I spoke the thing I never thought I'd speak aloud while looking at my son, my adult son, because I no longer confused habit with love. He had no response to that question, simply sat there and slowly nodded. I then posed the query that has been bothering me ever since I discovered that message. Are you familiar with Diane? He twitched his eyes. Enough, but not much. An old buddy of Dad's? He spoke in too casual a manner. Old friend? I said. Or the flame that is currently present? He moved. I'm not sure, Mom. Brian, quiet, he said. He texts her sometimes. They have gotten together. I don't pose inquiries. I gazed at him. And you didn't question him when you witnessed his treatment of me? He turned his head away. I don't care about it, I said. That's convenient, when your mother is going missing. Then he went off. Don't shout. No conclusion. Only the sort of guilt that clings to your ankles like damp rope and quiet. It was the night that I finally broke down. Not Harold's fault. Not even due to Brian. However, I became aware of how much I had taught myself to accept crumbs and consider it a feast. The following morning, I discovered a voicemail from an unidentified phone. Diane was the one, Margaret. Harold and I are merely pals. I'm not sure what you believe is happening. He has experienced a great deal of stress. Perhaps you ought to reevaluate your approach to this. You're not looking good by exposing family secrets in this way. A nice appearance. That was her statement. It felt like I was leaving a 30-year gaslight tunnel and walked the red carpet. I didn't return her call. But I did forward the tape to my attorney. Stephanie chuckled. This is still about appearances, in her opinion. Diane, no, this has to do with freedom. Harold responded to the divorce a few days later. The house was what he wanted. He desired the boat. He also desired spousal support, spouse assistance. I was being informed that I owed the man who had previously told me, You're lucky I let you stay at home, for the emotional support he had given me while I pursued independence. I sent Stephanie a copy of the email. What did she say? He's attempting to discipline you for leaving. He was going to be let down, I guess, since I wasn't going to leave. I was passing through the chaos, through the cacophony, through all the layers of deception and shame that had kept me small. We presented our proof. Bank documents, declarations, the money I made at the food stand, screenshots. Pictures of the bruises from the night he threw a glass and missed are displayed on the wall. He referred to me in voicemails as anything but a human. And the note, of course. Give Diane a call. Harold arrived at the motel that evening. The door was not answered by me. He rapped. Then he yelled. Then, for about 20 minutes, he sat in the corridor like a pouting child. After a while, the management asked him to go. Through the peephole, I observed. Not afraid, not depressed. Just finished. Stephanie gave a call the following morning. His motion for spousal support was turned down by the judge. The court is also investigating his financial situation. They may put some of his accounts on hold. For the first time in days, I grinned. Not for the cash. Because he was louder, and for the first time in my life, the system did not shield him. Harold had the opportunity to start over. He had the option to leave with honor. Rather, he started a quarrel with the one woman who is aware of his exact methods and is no longer interested in being polite. And I have a feeling. The version of me that is just getting started is not ready for him. I thought Harold would back off after the court rejected his plea for spousal support. He didn't. If anything, he became more audacious. The humiliation of hearing a judge say no ignited a fire inside him that hadn't been there since the 1990s, when he was still acting like a respectable man in public. Right now, he was falling apart. He began to come up for Mason's school pickup, which I had been managing with Melissa's tacit consent, and he stood near enough to be noticeable. Nothing to say, simply observing. Melissa remained silent. She was not required to. After the second court date, she stopped texting me, stopped returning my calls. I wasn't shocked. She had always taken a neutral stance, but as soon as things became tangled, she took sides. Furthermore, it wasn't mine. To his credit, Brian made an effort to keep in touch. He made one weekly call. Using the same script every time, Dad has changed. He's simply upset. Perhaps there is still time to resolve this. Sort things out. As if there had been a takeaway misunderstanding or a parking ticket. After a while, I stopped answering. If someone didn't want to hear the same truth, I didn't have the energy to keep saying it. I chose to concentrate on the things I could manage instead. I located a flat. Quiet, bright, and little. There are 2 bedrooms, one for Mason when he comes here and one for me. It features a little balcony overlooking a tree that turns gold in the fall. It felt miraculous that my hands didn't shake when I signed the lease. In my name, I opened a bank account. My emergency contact has been updated. I closed both eyes and went back to sleep. I also submitted a business license application. For years, I had been quietly selling baked goods, casseroles, and dumplings from my home while smuggling money across kitchen counters. I had nothing to conceal now, though. I created a logo, printed flyers, and filed for an LLC, the Table of Margaret. That is the name I gave it. Not because it seemed catchy to me, but because I finally had a table that was mine after 31 years of arranging tables for other people for birthdays, holidays, and events where I wasn't even called by name. I constructed one. I served one that also allowed me to sit down. And what do you know? People showed up. Former neighbors, friends from church, the book club ladies, even some of Mason's instructors. They made purchases. They left hints. They brought companions. The assistance wasn't ostentatious or noisy. However, it was genuine. Amidst all of that reconstruction, I recalled something. I remained a human, not a spouse, not a person who runs errands. Harold's shattered little drama does not have her as a supporting character, only me. I also thought she was nice. I appreciated that she got up early and went for a stroll around the block before coffee. I appreciated that she bought flowers for herself without waiting for a special occasion. I appreciated that she smiled at strangers once more, not out of courtesy, but rather because she felt secure enough to look up at them. Meanwhile, Harold continued to slip. He resumed texting. One evening, I'm missing you. The following evening, you ungrateful bitch. I hope your cooking is a hit with the bugs. Block, block, block. Block, block all the numbers. Each burner account. Every pitiful attempt to exert authority. Then he sent a picture one evening. It was of my old recipe book, which I kept in the kitchen drawer and which was filled with handwritten cards from my mother, notes, and clippings, blazing. In the backyard, he had set it on fire and taken a picture while it was still burning. No caption, simply smoke. For a whole minute, I gazed at the picture. At first, nothing was felt. Then, at last, something old and profound within me awoke. The part of me that recalled being 24, freshly married, and afraid to refuse. I gave Stephanie a call. The following day, she requested a restraining order. The hearing didn't last long. Harold never even showed up. The judge didn't hesitate to allow it. The last thing that held me to him, dread, suddenly broke. I returned to the house shortly after. Not to speak, not for nostalgia, to obtain what was rightfully mine. Stephanie had set up a time for me to legally gather my personal stuff under supervision. Harold was not permitted to be there. I'm grateful. I met Brian there. In that sheepish, guilty manner that men do when they're trying to make things better, by taking action, because they're too scared to say, I'm sorry. He had offered to help. I gave him permission to carry boxes. Said very little. However, he whispered to us as we were packing the final batch of picture albums. Do you believe you'll return at all? I made eye contact with him. To this residence? No. To my life as it is now? Never. He gave a nod, said nothing more, and it was plenty for once. I stood in the hallway I used to pace at 2 in the morning before I left. I said Harold farewell while he slept off his hangovers, a wailing infant on my hip, not out loud, only within my chest. To the woman who lived here in fragments, goodbye. I bid farewell to the quiet I formerly referred to as survival. Farewell to the man who, unless he was making fun of it, couldn't even recall the sound of my laugh. After that, I departed. The car is filled, light shoulders. Because leaving a house wasn't the only thing at stake. Walking inside myself was the goal. I left my house 9 months ago with a suitcase and a spine constructed of something I didn't realize I still possessed. My own family informed me of something more significant 9 months after they forgot my birthday. Who I truly am when I stop requesting permission to exist. I didn't set the past on fire. Didn't post a manifesto on Facebook or chuck dishes. I simply left the part they had written for me. And after I did, I understood. They didn't think I would quit performing. However, I did. The world did not end either. Last week, the divorce was finalized. Although Harold attempted to draw it out with a dozen tantrums, disguised as legal motions, the truth ultimately triumphed over the chaos. The house sold. Although he battled valiantly for the yacht, which he has yet to utilize, the assets were divided equitably. I was paid what I was due. More significantly, I regained my time. After the last court date, I received a text from Stephanie, my lawyer and unexpected anchor. Well done. Officially, you are no longer together. What is the sensation? After a long moment of staring at the message, I typed it back, as if I could breathe in my own flesh once more. Because this has always been about that. Not retaliation, not taking back power, just this inhaling, in full, at last, as I am. I feel at home in my flat now. I remember to water the plants on the windowsill. I adore this chipped cup, too much to discard it. The sound of irate footsteps is absent from the hallway. I pretend not to notice the second toothbrush in the restroom. Only me, and tranquility. That can occasionally be loud enough to fill an entire room. My modest food business, Margaret's Table, is expanding. I was asked to deliver lunches to a senior group at a church across town once a week. After tasting my dumplings, a woman I hardly knew gave me a check and remarked, "You saved me this week." I'm not sure what she meant. I didn't inquire. Healing doesn't always require a label. There are moments when it simply tastes like warmth. These days, Brian comes every other Sunday. Mason, whom he comes, eats as if to make up for all the years I fed him chicken nuggets and never received any gratitude. We don't discuss Harold very much. However, I can see it in Brian's eyes, the gradual unraveling of a lie he was unaware he had been living. Now he sees me. Not flawlessly, not always in time, but enough. All I ever wanted was that. I had not yet opened a box when I discovered an old picture a few nights ago. I was the one. Early 1990s. I was barefoot on the porch, wearing a yellow sundress, and grinning as if I had no idea what was about to happen. I gazed at her for quite a while, not in sorrow, not out of remorse, just a little recognition. "You made it," I muttered, and placed the picture on my dresser. She is worthy of being noticed. What individuals mean when they say starting over has been on my mind a lot. It always sounds so scary, so large. However, it isn't. It isn't leaving your work and relocating across the nation. It's not changing your name and coloring your hair. Sometimes it's as simple as getting out of bed and brewing yourself a cup of tea without asking if anyone else wants anything. Sometimes it's about making room for oneself. One drawer, one choice, one breath out at a time. I have done just that. Not begun anew. Just got begun. Alongside me, one final item, a letter. I discovered it concealed within an antique cookbook. It was written by my mother when I became engaged. Getting married isn't a sacrifice. It's a garden. It's not only you who pulls weeds. Additionally, don't strain yourself carrying water for someone who won't perform any work if the ground becomes dry. Love ought to uplift rather than deplete. Furthermore, you are not a reservoir, my daughter. The river is you. When I read that, I started crying. For years, I had forgotten that I was permitted to flow. I do now. Furthermore, I no longer have to prove anything to anyone. That's it. That's my tale. My age is 60 years. Separated. Free. Complete. And home at last. At last.